Hey everyone, I'm Matt with Dolan Divorce Lawyers in Connecticut, and today what I'm going to talk about is drug and or alcohol testing in child custody cases in Connecticut, or divorce cases that involve custody. Now, generally speaking, what I have found is that most judges, whenever there is an accusation of substance abuse, drug abuse, or alcohol abuse, courts almost always like to err on the side of caution and order drug testing or alcohol testing if there's any accusation of substance abuse. The courts generally want to protect children and frankly protect themselves. The last thing they want to do is deny a drug or alcohol test request and then something bad happens and they end up on the front page of the newspaper, essentially. That's not to say all judges order drug and alcohol tests when allegations are made, but I generally find that the majority of judges do order those types of tests. So if you suspect that your spouse is using drugs or alcohol in the presence of your children, you're going to want to file the appropriate motion with the court. So let me share my screen to show you a sample. You're going to file a motion for order, either pendente lite or post-judgment. So pendente lite is while, before a divorce is finalized or a custody action is finalized, or post-judgment is after it is finalized. You may have finalized a divorce or custody agreement and you have to come back in the future because there have been some ongoing issues. So if that's the case, it is post-judgment. So you're just going to want to cite the practice book 25-24, which is just a very general section of the Connecticut practice book that talks about motions. And you're just going to want to say that you're asking the court for orders mandating that the other party undergo drug and alcohol testing. And then you're going to want to list out the basis for why you are requesting that testing. And essentially, there has to be some sort of history of drug or alcohol abuse. You have to put some sort of allegation in there. They're not just going to order it if you say, your ex has never used drugs or never used alcohol. There has to be some substance there. And then you're just going to ask, so you're going to list all the bases for why you're asking for the testing, and then you're going to list specifically what you're asking for. So basically that the other party undergo drug testing, that they undergo alcohol testing. You might want to ask that they undergo a substance abuse and alcohol evaluation, and then kind of a catch-all of any other relief that the court feels is appropriate. So that's the motion, and ultimately you'll get into court, and generally speaking, you're going to want to try to reach an agreement. So hopefully you can reach an agreement, and I'll show you a sample agreement. But if you can't, then you're going to want to you're going to want to submit proposed orders to a judge, and you can use the language of this sample agreement as whatever your proposed orders are as well. So I think this agreement has both parties doing the testing. Often what will happen is if one party alleges that the other abuses alcohol, then the party who's been accused will say, oh, no, the other party, they abuse alcohol. So oftentimes the court will order both parties to test. And generally speaking, if you're accusing the other spouse of using drugs or alcohol, you probably want to be open to testing yourself. It's kind of hard to say, oh, I want the other party to be tested, but I'm not willing to do it myself. So this is an agreement that has both parties being tested. And you're just going to say that it's in the best interest of both parties, that nobody, basically nobody used drugs or alcohol in the presence of the children. And then commencing immediately, the parties shall each have monthly 90-day 10-panel hair follicle tests. So 90 days means that it goes back 90 days. They snip a piece of your hair. They wouldn't be able to do my hair. It's too short. But they snip a piece of your hair that enables them to look at the past 90 days of substance abuse and test based on the past 90 days. So you'll want to have that testing done periodically every 30 days or so. maybe until each part, if a party provides 3 consecutive clean tests, then they don't have to do the testing anymore. And this is just kind of a framework of language. Obviously, you can tailor this however you need to tailor it. So that is and you want to do 10 panel hair follicle testing. That encompasses a wide range of potential drugs. I think there's also 6 panel, or there's different panels, or there's also urine testing, but you want to do hair follicle testing if possible. So that's the drug testing component. And then for the alcohol testing, we often use these breath devices where basically a party blows into a machine once or a couple times a day to confirm that they're not using alcohol. And I put, Steve Paymer of Paymer Associates. If you just do a Google search for Paymer Associates, he's kind of the go-to person in Connecticut for this type of testing. So if you just Google him, I usually put his name directly into the agreements because we have him do all of our testing, and most other firms also use Steve. So commencing immediately, the party shall submit to a testing via the SL2 breathalyzer device. That's the device they use, using the following testing protocol. And you're going to want to put kind of the schedule in for when you want everybody blowing into the machine. You might also want to say that they test prior to driving an automobile. And then you want to put in language that says what happens if a test, or I think this is the definition of a positive test, or what happens if they test positive, and then the definition of a positive test. And then you want to put in language that says what happens if there is a positive test. So generally speaking, if there's a positive alcohol test or drug test, you might want supervised visitation to be put in place for a certain period of time. And you can tailor that language however you want. But generally speaking, a positive test is going to trigger some sort of limited parenting time for the parent who did test positive. And then there's some general language about providing Paymer Associates with contact info, signing authorization so that both counsel can have access to the records from Paymer. You're going to want to put in a provision that deals with who pays for the testing. You're going to want Paymer Associates to have a copy of the stipulation. So oftentimes you're going to want to call his office first to go over what they're very willing to review the language of a agreement that you have before you enter it as a court order. And that way, this testing stuff is always evolving. And they're very knowledgeable about what is a good testing schedule to have in place. So you might want to talk to Paymer's office to say, this is what we're thinking as far as a testing schedule. This is the language of the agreement. Does this plan make sense? And they may have suggestions for how to alter the plan. And then you want to put in place how long the testing has to remain in effect. It's not going to go on forever. If somebody can establish a pattern of clean tests, then the testing should stop after a reasonable period of time, maybe 60 days or 90 days. Something like that. So those are the basics of what to do if there is suspicion of drug and alcohol abuse in a custody case here in Connecticut. If you have any questions, feel free to give our office a call at any time, and we would be happy to answer them. Take care.